Hello, Death by Southwest listeners. And for Patreon, this is a double hello because I just was recording a little bit of extra stuff on the Zoom video for Patreon. It wasn't anything good, don't worry. It was just kind of getting ready and warming up. I say it every time, and I'll keep saying it till the end of time. I don't know why I do this on video, especially if I'm not going to even do myself up. I rolled out of bed essentially. I mean, I've had a whole morning of work and a recording with Jim and did the walk with the dogs and stuff, but I haven't showered, no makeup, hair is up looking like Betty Boop on top of my head. You know, you would think if you're going to get on video, you'd put on something more than a sports bra and a dirty t-shirt, but not me. So, hello, happy Monday. It is Monday. I'm recording this earlier than I did last week or the week before. I don't remember if I did one last week. Anyways, it's been kind of late at night that I've been doing the recordings so that it ends up coming out last minute. But I am on top of things today. It is only 1:30. I'm not patting myself on the back that much. I should probably have recorded this first thing, but I had a recording with Jim and had a lovely walk with the dogs, and then finished this mini story that I'm about to tell you. And I don't really have much to... Oh, sorry for all the rustling. I'm pulling my little Death by Southwest notebook over here, where I write down, oh my goodness, things that I want to talk about or messages from people and stuff. I have still not checked Instagram messages. That is happening this week, supposedly. No emails to the website and we did get a couple emails to the email, but I haven't responded. Oh, I just got a message. Thank you to Human GPS, who has been emailing with me. I sent him a little video.
Winter. Time for ice fishing, snowmobiles, and maybe a little pond hockey. Winter's full of fun and games until a pipe freezes and bursts. Get ahead of the freezing weather with Mow and Flow. It monitors your home's water and shuts it off automatically before it can burst your winter plans. Moen.
He's been emailing with me about my key fob for my car that is falling apart and not really working, and so I just never lock my car anymore. Great. The other day, I shouldn't say this out loud because I feel like I jinx myself. I don't actually believe in that kind of stuff, but a little bit. I don't know, maybe a little bit. It does seem to happen a lot. I said to Mark the other day, sorry, Patreon people, the cat is behind my computer pushing the computer screen at me. So that's why it just got off kilter. I said to Mark, maybe somebody will just steal it. I have insurance. I mean, my car's fine. It's nothing. It's a 2016 GMC SUV. It's not. There's nothing to like or dislike about it, really. I got it right after I got divorced because I had to get a car, and I had to get a car because the car I had, my ex-husband had. I don't even remember if he had bought it, if he was leasing it. I don't remember. But I didn't want, it wasn't technically mine. I think it was in his name. So got rid of it, traded it in, and got whatever I could afford. And it was this. And I wanted something with leather seats because I road tripped home, and, I brought the dogs with me everywhere. Well, I didn't have Henry yet, but I brought Izzy with me everywhere. I didn't want dog hair getting the seat. So this was an SUV that was moderately affordable and had leather seats. And it's not like a fun car. It's not exciting. So I don't want to talk shit about my car, but if I could get any car right now, I'd probably get a Jeep Wrangler, but like a stick shift. But how the fuck did I get on this? My key fob isn't working. Human GPS. Thank you so much for, first of all, being so knowledgeable about just such a wide array of things, and for taking the time to message me and be helpful about my key fob. And yeah, I still haven't fixed it. I still haven't totally figured it out. It's on the list of things to do, along with 85 other things. On my list of things to do also was to hand in my, trade in my phone, my iPhone 12. I've had it I had it before I moved here, and I've been here 3 years. So gotta be almost 4 years, 3.5 years, whatever. It's time. And it's paid off. So like now it's time. All the years that I've had it, no issues, hasn't broken, no cracks, taking good care of it. Dropped it the other day. Hugely cracked screen now. I literally was going to hand it in last week. Did I say this already? I feel like I've talked about this on a microphone. So forgive me if I did. I'm annoyed about it, clearly. And I need to find like one of those, you break it, we fix it, or whatever. I need to find a place that can replace the glass that is cheap. So if anybody has suggestions, please email or text them to me, because I'd like to do that soon. And it will take me a minute to get through Instagram messages. So send me a text or email deathxsouthwest@gmail.com. Our text line is 520-302-5253. What else? That's the only thing I had written down really was human GPS. I've gotten messages from other people, but I also think that I don't need to share every single message or nice thing or mean thing that people say. I don't think we have any new reviews. So that's like all the housekeeping stuff. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, and again, don't want to jinx it, but exchanged a little texting with Jenna, so we'll see. We'll see. I guess I should just leave it at that. For those of you, I realize that some people who listen to this either found this through Daddy Issues with Joe and Oliver, or maybe listen to Daddy Issues now, even though we're not putting out new episodes right now from this. And some people don't care and don't listen to Daddy Issues and never have, and that's fine too. But because I do know that some people did or do listen to Daddy Issues, nope, I take it back. I'm not going to cut that out because I refuse to edit bonus episodes. Because I know not that many people listen to them, but I was going to say something that is like, it's a very big, like potentially exciting thing, but it's a big if. So I'm going to save that until I have something official, because I feel like I often do that and then things don't come to fruition and then I feel like an idiot. Great. This is a great intro, isn't it? I'm really off to a winning start here. Just starting to tell stories and talking about my boring car. So for those of you who haven't logged off yet, thanks. And I will, I guess, jump into the story, and maybe by the end of it, I'll have I feel like there were other things that I wanted to talk about, just general things, not true crime things. Who feels that it's too early to decorate for Halloween? It is September 23rd. So there's about a week left of October. Is it too early, or is it acceptable? I always stand by October 1st, like 1 full month of Halloween decorations. I mean, look, I was about to say is plenty, but it's not. Like I could do 3 months if it wasn't 500 degrees here. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that. And okay, let's jump into the story, because then people who actually enjoy listening to me ramble can stick around afterwards for any other things that I think about. And everyone else who hates hearing me just ramble endlessly can get this story. Oh, I did want to say, like, did anybody do anything fun this weekend? I think I said this last week that I enjoy hearing what everybody's doing, especially, definitely people in Tucson, but everybody. I like knowing what everybody does on their weekends because my weekends are pretty unthrilling, so I can live vicariously through everyone else. This weekend, I was in bed at 8:30 on Friday, so killer night. Saturday, I worked on something for Joe and Oliver all day, most of the day. Then Mark and I went to this place here in town called Shooters. It's a bar/restaurant, I guess. I said that like I didn't know because really we've only ever gone there to drink. And we played like this, like the trivia games that they sometimes put on the bar. It's like a TV touch screen. Anyways, we played a bunch of trivia, had some drinks, and then came home and made hamburgers and listened to music. And Sunday, yesterday, we got up, walked the dogs, and went to breakfast. And then we were both like, okay, we're not going to binge watch anything. We're going to have some type of productive day. That went out the window really quickly once we started watching the new Menendez Brothers show on Netflix called Monster. So it's by Ryan Murphy, who also did the Jeffrey Dahmer story on Netflix with Evan Peters. And so it's kind of like the same series, like each section. Why do I become incapable of forming sentences when I put the microphone in front of my face? Each season, I suppose it could be considered, is focusing on like a different monster type person or people. So first was Dahmer. Now this is the Menendez brothers. And like there have been, multiple shows about the Menendez brothers. I've seen several documentaries. I've seen another show that was fictionalized, like dramatized. I didn't really remember. I knew they killed their parents, but I don't know if I ever paid that close attention to the actual story. And so I was like, let's just watch the first episode and then we'll go do something. I don't know what though, not like we had anything to do. And that quickly turned into, oh my God, we're not even going to go get groceries or cook dinner. We're just going to like pick something up and continue watching this. And it was so disturbing. Some parts of it were so disturbing, but really good acting. Chloe, I never have known how to say her last name. Savini. No idea. I know that's not correct. She's in it. Javier Bardem is in it. And then the two guys who play the Menendez brothers, I've never seen them before, but they both did a fantastic job. So I highly recommend. We finished it. I'm embarrassed to say we watched the whole entire thing. We were captivated. So that was really good. And then for like sometimes we don't watch. I don't know why I'm justifying this. Sometimes we don't watch TV with dinner. Sometimes we do. Yesterday we were in like TV mode. And so Mark had never seen this show called The Watcher. And and this actually has a point because this inspired the story that I'm going to tell you today. Or this show is inspired by the story I'm going to tell you today. So the show The Watcher, it's also a Ryan Murphy show on Netflix with Bobby I don't know how to say his last name either. Cannavale, I think, and Naomi Watts, and it's good. I saw it a long time ago. Mark hasn't seen it, so we watched the first episode yesterday. And that's all I'm going to say about it. It's good, and then I'll talk more, I guess, at the end, because it's inspired. That show is inspired by the story I'm going to tell you today. So if you've watched that show, you probably will know some of this story, although there's a lot of it that's like changed for the TV show. So today I'm going to tell you the story of the Circleville letters, which has been covered a lot. So I apologize if you've heard this story. I had heard this story before. I was aware of it, but I didn't ever really dig deep into it, and it's fascinating to me. So this is a decades old mystery. The Circleville letters is a true crime case that cast a shadow over the small town of Circleville, Ohio. It began in the late 1970s when an unknown author started sending menacing letters to local residents, exposing supposed secrets and sparking some pretty widespread panic. The case was marked by tons of different accusations, arrests, and even a suspicious death, and it kept this small community of Circleville living in a state of fear and left authorities completely baffled. So let's jump in. So Circleville is a small town located just outside of Columbus, Ohio, had a population in the 70s of around 12,000, tight-knit community, very peaceful, safe. It's best known for its annual pumpkin show, which I don't know how many people it attracted back in the 70s, or if the pumpkin show was happening in the 70s. I think it was. But nowadays it attracts almost 500,000 people for the pumpkin show. The Circleville Pumpkin Show goes from October 16th to 19th this year, if anybody lives near there and wants to go. And there's all kinds of stuff like the largest pumpkin competition. And I mean, we're talking like pumpkins that are 2,000 pounds. The Miss Pumpkin Show, the Little Miss Pumpkin Show. There's tons of baked goods and canned goods. There's a float competition. There's an art show. There's just a lot of different things happening at the Circleville Pumpkin Show. I would love to go to this, but I will not be. Ooh, they even have an escape room style mobile manufacturing experience. Interesting. Decorated golf carts. Country line dancing. Okay, you get the picture. It's a big festival. So that's really all we're going to talk about. And otherwise, it's just a kind of lovely, quiet, peaceful Midwestern town. So in 1976, Mary... I'm so sorry to do this. Is it Gillespie? Gillespie. I'm going to say Gillespie. Okay, Mary Gillespie. She's a local school bus driver in Circleville. And she is the initial target of these menacing letters. And so she gets the first letter in 1976. And it says, Miss Gillespie, stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. Sorry. No, you have children. The handwriting's pretty bad on these letters. It's weird. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified and everything will be over soon. So this letter was essentially accusing her, obviously knew personal details about her life because she did have children, and was accusing her of having an affair with the school superintendent, Gordon Massey. The writer is insinuating that they know about the affair, and are threatening to expose it. She kind of initially brushed this off. She was hoping it was just a prank, and was she having an affair? Was she not having an affair? Really hard to say. When the second letter arrived, though, and then more continued to arrive after that, the tone had escalated, and the writer made it very clear that they were watching her closely, monitoring her, and threatening her. And not only threatening her, but threatening her family. So this one says, Lady, this is your last chance to report him. I know you are a pig and will prove it and shame you out of Ohio. A pig sneaks around and meets other women's husbands behind their backs only, causes families, homes, and marriages to suffer. You are such a pig, and I will prove it. Why doesn't he come to your rescue, or has he too much to lose? his wife, in which pigs like you take advantage of, his $28,000 a year job, or his kickbacks? How's your little girl? Will she grow up to be like you? Another letter read, it's your daughter's turn to pay for what you've done. I shall come out there and put a bullet in that little girl's head. So at this point now, Mary is scared, to say the least. This is sounding more and more serious and far more threatening than the first letter, which I don't know. To me, if I was having an affair and I got a random anonymous letter that was calling that out, I would take that seriously, because how the hell does this random person know? If I wasn't having an affair and this was like a completely just baseless claim, then maybe I wouldn't take it as seriously, because it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be that scary. But then like this is pretty threatening, these next few letters. So she reaches out to the authorities for help. The police immediately launch an investigation into the letters, but there wasn't much to go on. So they kind of couldn't figure anything out. They really didn't get anywhere with it. And then not long after that, other people in Circleville began receiving anonymous letters. Everyone from elected officials, local newspapers, and just other random residents. And these letters were accusing their recipients of all kinds of different things: embezzlement, domestic violence, affairs, and even murder. But what was confusing to most of these people is, what was the goal? Like, what was this person writing these anonymous letters? What were they trying to accomplish? And how far were they willing to go to accomplish it, whatever it was? And no one knew the answer to that. So not long after Mary received her, several letters, her high school sweetheart and now husband, Ron Gillespie, received a letter. And in that letter, it said, Mr. Gillespie, your wife is seeing Gordon Massey. You should catch them together and kill them both. He doesn't deserve to live. The letter, he continued to get letters. One threatened that if he didn't expose the affair, his life would be in danger. It said, we know what kind of car you drive. We know where your kids go to school. Another letter said, Mr. Gillespie, I don't really understand this letter, by the way. Mr. Gillespie, you're doing a lot for her. No one cares that much for anyone these days. Make him come to her rescue, but he won't. He's being awful good lately. He knows what he must do, but he won't. Make her admit the truth. Call the school board. His affairs must stop. Everyone will know soon. Think of yourself. What's interesting is this person has horrible grammar, first of all. I fixed some of it. Terrible spelling, terrible grammar. And in between, it's not even actually sentences. There are just random colons throughout this entire thing. Like after each phrase almost, because it's not a complete sentence. He puts like a, colon. It's weird. So Mary's husband, Ron, is getting these letters now as well. He's kind of convinced that the person sending them is Gordon Massey, the person that his wife is being accused of having an affair with, the school superintendent. So Ron is like, I'm going to figure this out for myself. He went and confronted Gordon Massey directly. And the superintendent said, I absolutely am not sending these letters. I've even received threatening letters. And then Ron, after Ron confronted Gordon, sorry for that stutter there, guys. Ron received another letter that said, Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out. But Ron still, he was not going to do that. He did not do as the letter instructed him, which may or may not have been one of the bigger mistakes he made in his life. So in August 1977, Mary needed a break from all these letters, the stress of it. So she went to visit a friend or her cousin, I can't remember, in Florida. And Ron was home with their kids. So the phone rang one night in August, and Ron answered the call. And shortly after, he was visibly angry, really pissed off. He grabbed his .22 caliber revolver and left and was going to leave the house in a rush. As he's rushing out the door, says to his daughter, I'm going to confront the person behind all of these threatening letters. Not long after he left the house, his truck veered off the road, crashed into a tree, and he tragically died at the scene. The big question on many people's minds after this was, did he actually figure out who the Circleville letter writer was and confront this person before he died? We don't know the answer to that. Police did discover his gun. It was found underneath his body, and they discovered that it had been fired once prior to Ron crashing his car. But they had no idea where he fired it, who he fired it at, why he fired it, none of it. It was also very well known that Ron wasn't a drinker. He didn't really like to drink. And when he left the house that night and told his daughter where he was going, he was stone cold sober. Yet when the coroner did the autopsy and examined him, they found that he had almost twice the legal limit of alcohol in his blood. I'm not sure that I even understand how that's possible. And I wanted to just speculate now, but I feel like I'm going to sound like a real idiot. I guess he could have confronted the Circleville letter writer and what? He had a gun. So I don't know what the Circleville letter writer forced him to chug a bottle of vodka. That seems unlikely. Is there a way to get alcohol into somebody's body if they're already dead? Again, that's what I was going to say. That makes me feel like a real idiot for saying it out loud, but I'm saying it. I don't know the answer to that. So that's a very odd aspect of this. The coroner did rule his death an accident. Ron's brother-in-law, however, was convinced it was murder, was convinced it was the Circleville letter writer who had done this. After all, he did send letters to Ron making threats that Ron might end up dead. And then Ron ended up dead. Nonetheless, the investigation continued into the letters, not into Ron's death since it was ruled an accident. But this was just kind of an ongoing investigation. It really didn't stop. They were getting deeper and deeper into it, tapping phones, watching people's houses, trying to work with the United States Postal Service to figure out where these letters, that they could figure it out from the postmark that it was coming from Ohio, but they couldn't figure out much more than that. And after Ron Gillespie's death, the letters certainly did not stop. They continued and continued coming to the now widowed Mary Gillespie. Letters taunted her with phrases like, "Everyone knows what you've done. If you don't believe us, just make them mad and find out for yourself." Again, I'm not sure I really even understand this. If you don't believe us, so then it sounds like letter writers talking about themselves like there's more than one of them. Just make them mad and find out for yourself. Them who? Everyone in town? I don't know. I don't know if other people knew either. So, this is interesting. So, Ron is dead, sadly. Mary is now a widow. And she had always denied the affair with the superintendent, Gordon Massey. Who knows if she was just covering her own ass or if they really were not having an affair. Either way, once Ron was dead, Mary and Superintendent Massey began seeing each other. And so, that to me makes me think, yes, they were having an affair. Because it's kind of coincidental that after your husband dies, then suddenly you start actually openly seeing and dating the man who you were accused of having an affair with. Come on. And once they were dating openly, that's when the letters really became even more sinister, which is hard to do. They already threatened her daughter, but they did become more sinister. Specifically, February 7th, 1983, at 3:30 p.m., this is now several years after Ron's death, apparently, Mary Gillespie found herself in a potentially deadly situation of her own. While she was driving her school bus, which was empty because she was headed to pick up kids, she was driving her school bus that day, she noticed a handmade sign on a fence, which contained some vulgar remarks about her 13-year-old daughter. And that prompted her to stop the bus and walk over to the fence and try to remove this sign. So she's struggling to get it off and noticed that it was tied to a box with twine. So she was able to get the sign in the box off the fence, brought the box home, and when she opened it, she was met with a pretty startling discovery. Inside that box was a loaded gun. And what Mary didn't realize at the time is that it wasn't just loaded. When she brought it to the sheriff's office after that, and once investigators really examined the box, the gun, the sign, all of it, they very quickly realized that this was not just a gun in a box. This was a booby trap. This was improperly, but it was rigged to be, for the gun to go off when she tried to remove the sign from the fence. That was kind of the goal. It was set up like a booby trap. Obviously, they did a bad job because the gun did not go off, thankfully for Mary. However, that was the intent. So someone was trying to take her life. Also, aside from the good news that this gun did not go off and kill Mary, the gun led to a very much needed clue at this point, because now these letters have been going on for years and they are no closer to catching who's writing them. So firearm examiners at Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigation were able to restore the partially filed off serial number on the gun. And that led them to a co-worker of Ron's brother-in-law. So Ron's brother-in-law, Paul, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago that Paul, once Ron died in that car accident, Paul was convinced he was murdered. It wasn't an accident. So a coworker of Paul's, a guy named Wesley Wells, said, "Oh yeah, I sold that gun to Paul for $35. So the gun was Wesley Wells. He sold it to Paul. And so now the police are looking at Paul, who's Ron's brother-in-law. And not only that, but Paul and his wife, Karen Sue, were close with Mary and Ron when Ron was alive. The four of them hung out a lot. They were all very good friends and, family, essentially. So this was weird and shocking and didn't really make sense to people. But the police had to follow the evidence. So they went to talk first to Karen Sue, apparently, Paul's wife. And they were still married, but they were in the midst of a very, very not nice divorce. And Karen Sue had quite a bit to say to the police. She almost immediately confessed to police that her husband had definitely written the Circleville letters. And of course, the police's initial reaction was like, okay, you're going through a contentious divorce. Like, you're going to say shit about Paul to make him look bad. But she had evidence to back it up. She had discovered letters hidden throughout their house, and she handed these over to the police. Now, I was unable to find a ton of information on how realistic were these letters, the same as the other letters. Were they letters that she had received or Paul had received? Or were these letters, how were these letters so obviously to be written by Paul? I don't know. Those are all rhetorical questions because I do not know. I couldn't find that. Either way, the police decided, all right, we're going to go talk to Paul now. Paul was very cooperative, answered all of their questions, didn't ask for a lawyer, and adamantly denied the fact that he had anything to do with the booby trap and gun or the letters. And so they said to him, well, how did the gun that you bought end up in the booby trap? And he said, I don't know. He did mention that his gun had been stolen several weeks earlier, so he didn't know who by. This obviously seemed like a kind of convenient thing to say, but okay, maybe it had been stolen. He denied writing the letters. He allowed them to search his house, his car. He gave samples of his handwriting, and he took several polygraph tests. They all indicated that he was being deceptive. So that's what I found, that he was being deceptive. I found that repeatedly. Does that mean that he was outright lying? And also now we know, nowadays we know that polygraph tests are not all that reliable and certainly not an end all be all to solving a case. However, the letters that Karen Sue had found in her house and handed over to police did have his fingerprints on them, but his fingerprints were not on the booby trap and they were not on the gun. And although the sheriff did find similarities between Paul's handwriting and the handwriting of the other letters, like letters Mary Gillespie had received and things like that, it was questionable the way that he went about this handwriting analysis. He basically told Paul, you need to copy down, you need to rewrite, copy, here's a letter, copy it, rewrite it on paper here. And that's just not typically how it's done. I was reading a little bit more about it and, everything from the type of pen you're using, the type of paper, there's a lot more that goes into it than hey, can you copy this letter down? Let's compare. But that's kind of how the sheriff did it. Even though this seemed not nearly enough to say that Paul was responsible for any of this, nonetheless, he was arrested. And on October 24th, 1983, he went on trial, not for the letters, but for the attempted murder of Mary. He was actually never formally charged with writing the letters. At his trial, Mary Gillespie testified. And remember, Paul is Mary's now dead husband's brother-in-law. And so Mary is testifying, I guess that's not her brother-in-law. It's her husband. So I'm sorry. I'm in my head, I'm trying to figure out okay. So it's kind of like if Mark's brother-in-law was on trial and I testified against him, but we were all really good friends. Something similar to that. So that's got to be really hard. But she did testify about finding the booby trap. She talked about the anonymous letters she'd received, which Paul's defense team did not like because they argued that the letters didn't directly threaten Mary's life, which meant that they were irrelevant to this case. And I'm sorry, you can't see me if you're listening, obviously. But I'm in my head going back and trying to think did they threaten her directly? I guess not. They kind of threatened her daughter. They threatened her, but didn't threaten her life, I guess. But didn't matter. The judge still allowed 39 of the letters she'd received, which isn't even all of them. So that gives you an idea of how many letters she was receiving over the years. He allowed 39 of them in for evidence, which was helpful for the prosecution because they then were able to argue that the handwriting on the booby trap and the sign with the booby trap was similar to that of the letters and similar to that of Paul's handwriting. And they had an expert that testified during the trial that yes, they couldn't rule out that Paul didn't write. They couldn't say Paul did not write these, and they couldn't say that Paul 100% did write them. It was possible that these were written by Paul, basically, which seems very shaky to me as far as evidence goes. And really, there wasn't much direct evidence linking Paul to this booby trap, aside from that he did admit that, the gun was his. He bought the gun from his coworker, but he also said the gun was stolen. Paul's defense team also argued that Karen, his ex-wife or soon-to-be ex-wife at this point, had a huge motive and had opportunity to fabricate this evidence, to plant these letters, to even possibly write these letters, plant them throughout the house. Yes, Paul did fail the polygraph tests and his fingerprints were on the letter, but because they were not on the booby trap or gun, they could have gotten on those letters. If Karen Sue had written these letters and planted them around the house, well, she could easily get his fingerprints on there. I don't know, hand him a stack of papers with one of these on the top and then get it back. Anyways, the case largely relied on circumstantial evidence. Some more of the evidence that the prosecution used is that the day that the booby trap was discovered, the 7th, Paul had taken the day off of work. Multiple defense witnesses testified saying that they saw him at home that day. He took the day off work because he was having work done on the house. And multiple people testified saying, yes, I saw him at his house that day. So could go either way. The box containing the gun, it was an industrial-sized chalk box, Apparently, this was a common item at Anheuser-Busch, which is where Paul was employed. Paul was also very intelligent, had a master's degree, was some type of higher level manager at Anheuser-Busch. I almost just said, am I saying that right? I'm not going to. I'm going to fly right by that because I know it annoys people. And these letters were like kind of dumb, like tons of grammar, tons of spelling mistakes, which of course anybody could fake that for sure. But if we're just going off circumstantial evidence type things here, which is what most of this case was going off of, like, didn't make sense for it to be Paul. But despite the lack of direct evidence, a jury only took about 2 hours to convict him of attempted murder. And he was given the maximum sentence of 7 to 25 years in prison. Now, Paul ended up serving 10 years of that 7 to 25 years sentence. But we'll come back to that. So not everyone was convinced that it was Paul, though. Some believe that Paul wasn't the only one involved and that multiple people were involved, which could potentially hint at like a larger conspiracy. Others were trying to figure out who the writer might be because it definitely had to be someone with a personal vendetta against the town or against the town's people. There were just theories popping up all over at this point. Paul's in jail, but the people who are not, the people who don't think that it was either him at all or only him are, rumors are flying. Theories are going wild. One theory was that it was the son of Gordon Massey, the superintendent, who Mary had an affair with. Some other people believe that a co-worker of Mary's was infatuated with her and they were doing this. None of this really ever panned out. But one thing that the community could kind of collectively agree on and they all hoped for was that this was it. It was done. Like if Paul was a letter writer, or even if he was part of a letter writing team or group, they were hopeful that this meant the end of the letters now that he was in jail. And many people who did believe it was Paul, like wholeheartedly believed it was Paul, well, they were breathing a huge sigh of relief. But sadly, they were breathing a huge sigh of relief way too soon. Because despite Paul's conviction and being in prison, the letters continued. And they didn't just continue. They kind of increased. Hundreds of letters continued to flood the mailboxes in Circleville. And at some point after Paul was imprisoned and people continued to get letters, the warden at the prison confirmed that Paul couldn't have sent these letters. They kept him in isolation. He was strip searched. All of his incoming and outgoing mail was inspected. And initially, when he was first in prison, he had no access to pens, paper, pencils, anything. He had no access to writing anything. I think eventually he was given access to being able to write letters, but the letters, during the time when he had no access to any type of writing materials, people were still getting lots and lots of letters. So, and even Paul received an anonymous letter while in prison. And I have it here. It says, so his last name is Fresh Hour. Fresh Hour. It says, Fresh Hour, : Now, when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all? No one wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Ha ha. Tell no one of this letter. I saw the paper. Great news. Great. The sheriff loved it. Ha ha. Do you believe it now? Do you? Again, like kind of.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Pedantic letters. I meant to read this one earlier. Mary had gotten a letter that says, just tell your daughter we are going to post some signs about her next year at the bus stop. So this is before the booby trap. Sorry, guys. I went out of order because I have everything written down. Then I also have images that anyways, I missed this one. But so this was before the booby trap. Mary got this to tell your daughter we are going to post some signs about her next year at the bus stops. Since you caused this by what you've done to Mrs. Massey and all knows it, how will you face her? But your type have no consciences, or you wouldn't have hurt Mrs. Massey behind her back. So like that to me, it's like so focused on Mrs. Massey. It seems like somebody who cares about Mrs. Massey. Okay. So sorry, where I was is that Paul had received an anonymous letter in jail. And at the trial, Paul's lawyer had raised some interesting questions and said, who hated Paul enough to try and get him in trouble? If you read the divorce decree, the only person who stands to profit financially if Paul is convicted and goes to prison is his ex-wife, Karen Sue. Remember, she's the one who basically is the first person to call Paul out and said, like, yeah, he is the Circleville letter writer. And so in the divorce, Karen Sue lost like everything. She lost her home. She lost custody of their daughters. She was living in a trailer actually on Mary Gillespie's property. So if Paul was convicted and went to jail, that all changed. She get the house, she get her kids back. She wouldn't have to live in this trailer. So there is a significant motive for Karen to get Paul put away. And a lot of people started thinking maybe Karen Sue had framed Paul because there were apparently a few witnesses that had seen someone at the booby trap scene, like at where Mary found that sign with the gun. And the descriptions of the person they saw there kind of matched Karen Sue's boyfriend. So maybe did Karen Sue and her boyfriend set Paul up, frame him? Unfortunately, we don't know. The police were never able to kind of prove whether there was any truth to this theory. And so no definitive answers were determined when it came to her. And as the years went by, this mystery continued. So now we're in the early 90s, and an investigator named Martin Yant is investigating Paul's case. And he discovered evidence in some police reports that might suggest an alternate suspect. So this, again, leads back to what I just described. It's a little bit out of order here, but this is a decades old case. I'm trying to do it as like a mini story. So it was hard to sift through some of this, but there was apparently, Martin Yant said there was another bus driver who saw what I think is very significant. It was something that never came up at trial, and it points in a whole different direction. So investigators had never followed up on this potentially alternate suspect, but this investigator, Martin Yant, did. A female bus driver, he went and talked to this female bus driver, who said that 20 minutes or so before Mary found the booby trap, she drove by the same spot. Martin Yant is quoted as saying, she said she saw a man standing beside an El Camino, but the man turned away from her and acted like he was going to the bathroom, so she didn't get a good look at him. But what she did see didn't match Paul. She said he was a large man with sandy hair, and Paul was not a large man, and he had very dark hair. However, Karen Sue's boyfriend at the time was a large man with sandy hair, and allegedly Karen Sue's brother had at some point had an El Camino. So this kind of relates to what I had just said previously, that there were other potential suspects. Like, this to me is huge, but weirdly it never went anywhere. I mean, Paul's in jail. This just never went anywhere. Then in 1993, a prison inmate named Thomas Lee Dillon sent a letter to the Columbus Dispatch, and he claimed that he was the Circleville letter writer. He was already in prison serving a life sentence for murder. He had a history of very violent behavior. And so authorities were like, all right, well, we can't ignore this. So they began investigating his kind of admission that he was the letter writer. But they still didn't figure anything out. No charges were filed. I mean, first of all, he's in jail for the rest of his life, prison for the rest of his life for murder. So it would be nice to know who the letter writer is, but like, what are you gonna put him on trial again? I guess you would. I guess you put him on trial for writing these letters. I don't know how that would work. And they did note some similarities between his handwriting and the Circleville letters, but nothing definitive. So no charges were ever filed. This was another just kind of dead end. Also in 1993, Unsolved Mysteries decided that they were going to come to Circleville to investigate the case. They had caught wind of it. They wanted to come and have their own investigators kind of dig in. And before they even left to come to Circleville, they received a letter. And the letter said, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay." Signed by the Circleville writer. And El Sickos is spelled like E-L, like I know that's not, Sickos is not a Spanish word, but like El Paso, E-L. Why did I feel the need to explain that so much, guys? Nonetheless, Unsolved Mysteries was not scared off. They went ahead and went to Circleville. And Paul had just been released on parole and agreed to speak to Unsolved Mysteries. And during his interview, he urged the show, to dig even further into find something out. This has been going on for years, since 1976. It's now 1993. He said, "I'd really like to see someone look at this case, the letters, reopen the letter part of it, get in and find out who wrote these letters." Well, no shit, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want this to be figured out? Going on 17 years this has been going on. So Paul's ex-wife, Karen Sue, did not participate, refused to speak to Unsolved Mysteries. But according to some people, she was keeping track of everyone who did speak to Unsolved Mysteries. Allegedly, she sat in her car near the location where people were being asked to go to give interviews to Unsolved Mysteries, and she took pictures of everybody going in and out. Again, not definitive. Never led anywhere. Doesn't really matter, but I'm just giving you all the information. So weirdly in 1990, this says 1994. Again, timeline is a little iffy, but right around the same time that Paul was paroled and released from prison, after Unsolved Mysteries got their letter, the letter suddenly stopped. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. I just, if you're watching this on Patreon, you just saw my face get scared because my phone just lit up. It says college student shot. I can't believe I forgot to turn my phone on silent. All right. Well, I do want to see what that is, but my Citizen app. Oh, I did read this already in the news that a student died after being shot late Sunday night on some volleyball courts on the U of A campus. They're still looking for the shooter, described as a 6-foot man between 19 and 25 years old with facial hair and dark curly collar length hair. That's very sad. So people in Tucson, be on the lookout. Sorry for that interruption. So even though the letters stopped after Paul got out of prison, which is weird, most people still believed it was Paul. The people who thought that it was Paul from the beginning still believed it was Paul. And this really, really hurt Paul. He was, he'd been in prison for 10 years. He just wanted to get on with his life. And he's still having to kind of face these people who believe that he's guilty. And what hurt him even more is that some of his family believed that he was guilty. This war between him and his ex, Karen Sue, it had just completely destroyed their family. And then the accusations that Paul was the letter writer destroyed their family even further. Paul and Karen had 2 daughters and a son named Mark. And the kids were really forced by Karen to pick sides. Karen was not okay with the kids seeing her and seeing Paul. They had to pick. And Mark, Paul's son, picked Karen, picked his mother, and pretty much cut Paul out of his life. He did this when Paul was in prison. So he never visited him in prison, didn't see him for 10 years, really never spoke to him again. Paul knew that his son hated him and broke his heart, but what was he going to do about it? Paul actually thought that the person who stole his gun, remember how Paul told police, my gun was stolen a few weeks ago? He thought that it was his son, Mark. that he had stolen this gun before the booby trap was found. And Paul didn't tell the police this. He didn't tell anybody this until much later, because family was everything to Paul. And even though Mark stopped talking to Paul and they had no relationship, Paul was not going to be the one to put any kind of, to point any fingers in his son's direction. He would never throw his son under the bus, so to speak. Pun intended, I guess. Paul did have suspicions though, like maybe his son Mark was working with Karen Sue, Mark's mother, to kind of orchestrate the whole thing, to write the letters and plant them in the house, to really frame Paul and make him look guilty. But he had no proof. It was just a hunch. And now we're going to flash forward to September 11th, 2002. In Portsmouth, Ohio, a man's body was found floating in the Scioto River. And it was determined to be 39-year-old Mark Freshour, Paul's son. He had shot himself. And Karen Sue told police that, Mark had suffered from depression for years. A lot of people thought that Mark maybe not the letter writer, but the booby trap person, or that Mark had framed Paul. That Mark had some type of kind of nefarious involvement in all of this, and that he just couldn't deal with the guilt any longer. And that's why he killed himself. Again, no answers. Paul maintained his innocence always. When he got out of prison, and for many years, he continued to contact the FBI, asked them to continue investigating the case. FBI never responded to him. And this case just went unsolved. Never went anywhere. And just recently, there have been some small advances in it, but don't get your hopes up. Almost 3 decades later, 48 Hours decides their investigators are going to investigate. So one of the big questions over the years was the gender of the letter writer. And 48 Hours after, going through all the evidence, and imagine 3 decades of evidence, although the letters supposedly stopped in 1994. Not supposedly, they did stop in 1994. That's still, 14 years worth of letters and evidence. This case has remained open until recently, but the case remained open for many, many years. So continued evidence was being collected whenever, they found anything. So 48 Hours goes through all of this evidence, and the letter writer, they realized, kept referring to themselves by saying I'm the boyfriend of a woman. I didn't see that in any of the letters I read, but I read maybe 5 or 6 letters that I was able to find online, and there were thousands over the years. So, and so 48 Hours kind of deduced that it seemed like the letter writer was trying to convince people that they were a man, which 48 Hours believed meant that it was quite possibly a woman. But even more recently, a forensic handwriting expert has disagreed with that. So even though Paul never stopped maintaining his innocence, he maintained his innocence forever. Beverly East, this forensic handwriting expert, says she is 100% sure that Paul is a letter writer, and she would swear on the Bible in court up and down. She is 100% sure. There isn't a doubt in her mind, which to me seems like, I feel like you can't be 100% sure about. There are very few things you can be 100% sure about in life these days. So she began by identifying distinct writing patterns in Paul's writing. She was examining letters that he had written to a friend, apparently. And then she also studied a selection of 49 of the anonymous letters, spanning from when they first started in 1976 through 1994. She found unusual that the G letters were unusual, and they were shaped like the number 6 in several of the Circleville letters, including one that was sent while Paul was in prison. So that's confusing. She also found number patterns and various similarities in the way numbers were written between the anonymous letters and Paul's letters. She found a lot of similarities, and then she found several similarities that were just so rare. Like they were very distinct writing quirks or handwriting quirks. And she said, she talked to 48 Hours, and she said, she admitted that there are writing patterns in the anonymous letters that don't match Paul's. But there are also over almost 100 examples of distinct quirks in Paul's writing and writing patterns that do match the anonymous letters. And so an interviewer for 48 Hours asked her and said, document examiners and handwriting experts, like they have been wrong in the past. And Beverly East said, I cannot speak for others. There are always going to be times when people are inaccurate. And it's not because the science is not accurate. It's because that particular examiner has not done due diligence to arrive at the opinion that they should do. And there was also, so that's the handwriting aspect of that. And that has happened recently. This woman swears, she's 100% sure, she would bet her career on it, that the person who wrote the letters is Paul. And then there was a little bit more that 48 Hours dug up. So during their review of the case files, 48 Hours uncovered information that did align with Beverly East, the handwriting lady's conclusions. They had discovered Paul's fingerprints on around a dozen letters that were postmarked during his time in prison. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole says she can't explain those letters, but she also can't ignore that during Fresh Hours, Paul's decade in prison, the Circleville letter writer mailed hundreds of letters. So yes, they found Paul's fingerprints on about a dozen letters that were mailed while he's in prison. They weren't mailed from the prison. They were sent out while Paul was in prison. Remember, the warden was like, Paul can't be sending these letters while he's in prison. So this FBI profiler said, quote, somebody else is sending these letters. They're not happening by magic. Somebody else is writing the letters. Paul died June 28th, 2012 at the age of 70. He was fighting to prove his innocence till the day he died, which he sadly predicted almost 36 years prior to his. That seems not right. I'm sorry. As I'm reading, I'm like 36. Well, yeah, I guess that could be right. 36 years prior to his death. During an interview, he said, when I'm dead and in my grave, people are going to still believe I'm sending those letters. And he wasn't wrong. That's what's happening. Sadly, we will not ever know the truth about Paul. Paul is now dead. And we also won't know the truth about the letters because despite decades of investigations and different angles being explored, the real identity of the Circleville letter writer still remains a mystery. And unfortunately, the local sheriff's office has ultimately closed the case. So this case is closed, not resolved. This many years later, it seems unlikely. So they started in 1976. I hate doing fast math, but that's 48 years. So almost 50 years ago this happened. Jeez, 1976 was that long ago. And the case is closed. They never resolved it. Thousands of letters you can't figure out who wrote. How in this day and age, with all the DNA, technology, everything, how have we not been able to find on thousands of letters some piece of DNA that leads, because now you can do the genetic testing. So let's say the person who wrote these letters, it's like 50 years ago, so there's a good chance they're dead, but maybe one of their relatives is alive. Like if I was one of the recipients of these letters, I don't care if the person is dead. I want to know who it was. I want to know who it was. That's it. That's a terrible way to end this story, but that's how I'm ending it. I just panicked that I had not pressed record. Whew, thank goodness. Oh my goodness. I just flipped back over to my Zoom. I look like a boy. Sorry, Patreon. I shouldn't put this out, but I will. So this story inspired the show The Watcher on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I want to say I recommend it, but I don't really remember it. And so we've only watched the first episode. First episode was great. If the rest of the show keeps up like this, then yes, I recommend it, but I don't know. But it is based on a true story, and this is the story. So I'm sure many of you heard this story before, so I apologize if it was a duplicate for you. But if you haven't heard it, I'd love to know what you think, because this story really caught my eye. I've had a couple people suggest other spooky stories to continue doing. We're going to continue doing these spooky mini stories up until Halloween. I mean, maybe we'll continue them after it. I kind of like doing stories from all over. It really opens it up to like a lot more. There's a lot more options if I am not just doing stories from the Southwest. And I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose and name of the podcast. But, you know, I mean, for like 6 weeks straight, I just did episodes about being dumped and heartbreak. So I feel like you never know which way this podcast is going to go. It's always going to be, you know, entertaining, hopefully. I don't know. Maybe that's inaccurate. It's always going to be something. I can say that. It's always going to be something. So, yeah, that is the Circleville murders. I guess it's not really a mini story. We're already at over an hour. I think I talked for like 10 minutes in the beginning. So, not exactly, I didn't do such a good job of the mini. I was thinking of doing these like mini story. By mini stories, I meant like 20 minutes. But as we know, I can barely do an introduction in under 20 minutes. So why would I think I could tell any kind of crime story? I really can't. But thank you for listening. I'm going to put this out now. Yeah, I don't know. Keep your fingers crossed. I would love it if Jenna came back. I miss doing this with her. It is easy. It's easier for me to do it alone for sure, because I can do it any time of day or night, and you know, it goes a little bit quicker. But I do miss doing it with her. So let's fingers crossed that she will be back. I'm sure that I know I've heard from several people that they really prefer it when it's both of us, and I totally get that. And I'm hoping, but I don't know. I'm not going to promise. But yeah, please keep sending your case suggestions for either ones in the Southwest or, you know, other places, because who knows, maybe Monday will become like, you know, death by nationwide and Tuesdays will be death by Southwest. I don't know. And I don't know. I just like hearing from you at all. I feel like I'm begging people to write and send voicemails and send text messages because I am, but my life is not like super, super thrilling where I have so much like hot gossip to talk about each week. I could talk to you guys about TV shows till like the end of time. Oh, I don't think anybody here listens to Jim's podcast, so I'm going to say this on here. I hope I don't get in trouble. We are interviewing. Remember how I told you that like I had never seen Below Deck on Bravo, and Jim had mentioned that it's like one of his favorite shows. I was like, what? One of Jim's favorite shows is a Bravo show. I have to get on top of this. And so I started watching it. Now I can't stop watching it. And we are interviewing someone from Below Deck tomorrow on Jim's podcast. It won't come out for like a couple weeks, but I've never been more thrilled, which is saying a lot, because we interviewed some pretty big celebrities on Daddy Issues. And I'm really excited about this captain from Below Deck that we're interviewing tomorrow. So, anyways, I was saying my life is not that exciting these days, which I'm fine with. Less excitement means less drama, and that's good. But yeah, tell me your thoughts on decorating for Halloween. Tell me what shows you're watching. Tell me any fun things you did over the weekend, and then send me any questions that you might have, or comments or suggestions or anything. I just like hearing from you. So again, our phone number, and you don't have to leave a voicemail. I love getting voicemails. You don't have to, though. You can send a text to this number as well, and I can text you back. It's 520-302-5253, or send an email to death, the letter X, and then southwest @gmail.com. You can also go to the website, same thing, death, the letter X, southwest.com, and send a message there. Try our Patreon, or just keep listening to the episodes and you don't have to do anything else. That's fine too. I appreciate you listening. Shit, something just popped in. Oh. And go try, this is not an ad. I don't have an ad to read for them. I'm going to be the most obnoxiously transparent here. I am out of my Lumi microdose gummies. I take them every night. They help me sleep so much. And with our discount code, which I'm assuming is still good, even though I haven't read an ad for them in a little while, it's like almost a $30 discount, I want to say. I think the bottles are usually $80, and with the discount code, which is escaping me now, let me see if I can find it, they're like $50, which is significant. But obviously, if nobody buys them, they're not going to keep, except for me, they're not going to keep sponsoring the show. And I love them, and I want them to send me some for free. God, I sound like such an asshole. I'm sorry, guys. This is one of those moments when Mark would be like, it's okay if you just are not totally, totally honest all the time. Like, you could keep some things to yourself. And that's probably very true. Wow, I can't find the last time I read an ad for them. I'm flipping through, I keep like a thing. No, Factor meals. I never even got any free Factor meals. We read an ad for them. I shouldn't admit that on this podcast because now they're never going to sponsor us again. Oh my God, I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong. I did get Factor meals. That's how long ago it was. I'm totally wrong. I absolutely did get Factor meals, and they were weirdly good. I was not expecting that. I take it back. Sorry. But I don't know when the last time Lumi sponsored us is. I can't find the fucking code. So never mind. But anybody who needs help with sleeping or pain, or honestly for me, it's stress. Like I just found the code. The code is Southwest for 30% off. Yeah, that makes sense. I find on a recent bonus, I know I was talking about like how my emotions have been kind of at a high lately, which is like saying a lot because I'm kind of a highly emotional person, period. So if they're at a high and even I'm noticing it, they're like at a high. And I guess maybe it's not healthy to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes when I'm just feeling like by evening, if I'm feeling very frustrated or very just like agitated with whatever, like last week I broke my iPhone. Oh my God, big deal. Who the fuck cares if you broke your iPhone? There's so much worse things happening in everyone's lives. But like that, and then, my electric bill was like $1,000 billion. And I don't know, things just kind of add up sometimes progressively throughout the day. And then one little thing and you're just like, I'm going to lose my mind. In those moments, I have taken a gummy to just take a little bit of the intensity out of the frustration or agitation that I'm feeling. And I guess I don't know if that's healthy or not. I mean, like if I was like, oh, I'm chugging a bottle of vodka because my emotions are too much for me to handle, I feel like that's not healthy. But maybe taking a weed gummy is not a big deal. And now we're getting to that point in the episode where I start rambling. Why does it sound so quiet? There we go. Where I start rambling and just talking in circles, and I get embarrassed about everything I've said for the last 10 minutes. So I'm going to cut myself off and say, once again, thank you for listening. Send me messages, questions, thoughts, comments, anything. And if I sounded like a real asshole or crazy person for the last 10 minutes, please ignore it. Because sometimes I think I just black out when I'm talking on the mic and I just ramble and have no idea what I'm saying. But I do know that I appreciate all of you and love you and hope everyone has had a fantastical Monday. And I will be back tomorrow with what I believe will be the conclusion of the Austin yogurt shop murders. And did I say this last week? Lori left a comment. Lori, thank you for saying how much you're enjoying it. And I hope everyone else is. And I'll be back tomorrow. Okay, bye. Love you all.